get started. We have five points that we want to discuss over here. The first agenda point is we're going to talk about DeOps. We're also going to be talking about why applications don't get modernized. And then we're going to talk about a couple analysis frameworks to start to take a look into it when your company is deciding that they want to go ahead and perform some sort of an application modernization, right? How are we going to be able to prioritize what gets done and how it gets done? In addition to that, we'll also be talking about what sort of value can you get from different innovation initiatives with regards to the applications that you're using on a day-to-day basis. To give you more specifics, we're going to talk about an aviation and an aviation industry specific example and how you can leverage Microsoft Dynamics 365, the finance and operations, again, as an example that's going to kind of tie everything up that we're talking about. So ultimately, we have this business transformation strategy, and really the conversation has turned from, not if we're going to be able to transform our business, but when are we going to be able to transform a business, and then how are we going to be able to transform the business? And what's really important to think about here is that there could be many reasons why you want to transform the business. It could be from adopting different technologies, innovating your applications, like what we're going to be talking about. But essentially, the driving factor should be in creating these new business models and new revenue streams and providing a new vehicle that you should have for customer intimacy. And if if this is your first time coming to any of the webinars, then this is going to be something new. If this is not, then you've seen us talk about the value chain from Michael Porter and the organizational analysis. So we're not going to spend any time discussing that. But in the context of decentralized operations, which is really nothing new, we talk about the value that happens when you start working with organizations. It's very limited businesses that don't rely on any other businesses out there. So if you think about the sum of all its parts and how a business operates, the attendees of this presentation, right? You're involved from a personnel perspective, probably in different segments of your business, whether you are on the production side, the sales and marketing side, from the IT side, the HR side, the accounting side, right? So there's this value that happens when you start to work among the different value streams with different organizations. And what we've seen over the course of time really is how business modernization, how different strategies have really helped accelerate. And we've shown this in a previous webinar, but just to go over this quickly, for example, AccuWeather, what they wanted to do is they wanted to cut down their IT costs. So they migrated into an entirely new cloud strategy, saved their IT costs by about 40%. Geico wanted to have a tighter integration with their customers. So therefore, they wanted to provide a 24/7, always available system that works on different kinds of devices that customers really have, right? So that was a modernization effort on their behalf. Rolls-Royce also realized that, within their aviation, we're going to get to a piece of this, is that within their aviation department, there's so much data out there that they just weren't collecting. So their modernization effort was around the data analysis. So when we start to take a look at these different applications, whether you're talking about a Geico or you're talking about a Rolls-Royce or you're talking about your own company, these are typical application components, right? And they don't necessarily have to be all part of the same application, but whatever app that your company is using, it typically consists of, you could have a database, I'm sure, right? Maybe it's a custom development. This second icon here talks about, this is like like a web app, right? It has APIs, for example. You could be using an ERP system, for example, an SAP or an Oracle, or like we're going to show you a Microsoft Dynamics 365. Or you could have different components like IoT sensors, um, to be able to communicate information back and forth. So you can take this healthy mix of different technologies and combine that into an application. And what we're looking here is a diagram of a traditional application example where you have this group of individuals. Let's just call this company one. And then there's another application, let's call this company two, and another application which is being used by company three, and another application which is used by company four. And essentially, this is how current business is happening in a decentralized operational way, right? So you could be exchanging information through emails, through faxes. You could be just, there's a lot of ways that we can communicate and get business done, right? So how can we actually modernize what we're doing to provide new value? Well, obviously we're here talking about a blockchain component. So just to kind of talk about the components that would typically go into a blockchain network, just so we can start at, this is a little bit past of a blockchain 101, but just understand that there's a protocol layer, which is your consensus algorithms, your side chains, your channels, virtual machines, etc. You have your network layer, which is where the different nodes communicate with each other. You can also have an off-chain compute like trusted execution enclaves. You can have your infrastructure layer, which is your containers, your storages, tokens, etc. And then there's all these other components that would come with the blockchain network, such as making sure that there's support around it, that you're monitoring transactions, etc. And if this is new to you, we definitely recommend that you take a look at our website again, www.envisionblockchain.com. Take a look at some of the workshops that we have to get familiar. We provide blockchain 101s, but we're just assuming that maybe a little bit further. Realistically, this is going to be the last we're going to talk about blockchain because it's going to happen in the background. And another way to demonstrate that is this decentralized operations that we discussed before. These businesses that are working together, they need to have this decentralized application. So for example, you have this blockchain network, which is acting as a reference point to all of these different companies, company 1, 2, 3, and 4, regardless of what application that they have, right? So this is kind of the preface for the rest of the presentation. So now let's kind of shift gears a little bit. And now that we understand that you can leverage blockchain with current applications. So the question is, why is it that current applications don't get modernized? Well, I mean, the first one is that when you start to take a look into a modernization initiative, there's like the first picture is like a bunch of spaghetti. Everything is all thrown together, and then things start to get a little complicated. To go along with that is, let's say that there was a system that was implemented already. The second picture kind of defines that there could be missing information, right? Depends on the business processes. And for example, if you're familiar with the term SOPs, the standard operating procedures, if the systems was implemented correctly, then there's a well-documented repository of how the system is comprised of, different APIs that could exist, et cetera, et cetera. But chances are that if an application is not going to get modernized, it's because we're just missing information. It wasn't properly documented during the implementation stage, or maybe this was just developed from within the organization to reach a certain milestone, if you will. And then the third picture is, there's this fear of we don't have the right skills in-house. We don't have the ability. We don't have the experience, right? It comes down to a people problem, right? Because technology is something that we can always develop out, given the amount of vendors that are out there, such as Envision Blockchain providing system integration. This is what we do. This is our bread and butter. But if an organization is not really a technology company from the core, then to modernize an application, there could be a certain amount of rigor involved. So to address this, there's typically some sort of an analysis framework that really comes into play. So we're going to showcase here two different analysis frameworks, one that we pulled from a previous presentation that we definitely recommend that you go ahead and take a look into. If you go to our website, you can go see our knowledge repository. You can see the videos, and you can see all the for the past couple of years, every month that we do these webinars, we always have these on-demand type of videos. But we're going to quickly talk about, so for example, there's an application prioritization framework. All right, so if anyone is familiar with an application prioritization framework, you're probably going to be looking at different functionalities that you're looking at within your application, right? Again, think about what you do on a day-to-day basis, or think about what your business does on a day-to-day basis. And now you use these applications to, enhance your day-to-day or to make your business happen. So you want to be able to evaluate based on performance, based on architecture, based on financial costs, based on the amount of risk that the company is taking, based on the operations, and also based on security and compliance, right? This view right here that we're looking at is really a top-down view. So just to kind of dive into this just one layer deeper, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but when we're talking about performance, we're talking about how elastic is the application, how scalable is the application, the resource intensive, is there latency requirements, throughput requirements that we need. As we start to talk about the architecture, we start to talk about, okay, so now we have an application, we have our application. Is there a user interface that we need? How complex is it to change this user interface? What do we need to do as far as managing the data complexity, the data governance, the infrastructure that's involved with the application? In the financial aspect of it, we want to always be able to see where's the business value, what's the operating costs. We talk about the risks. We talk about organizational risks. We talk about how critical is this application to your business? Is this a business critical app? Is this something that we need to constantly invest into because our business thrives on it? Or is there really no value in this? What are the technical components? What are the resources that's needed in order to make this happen? Do we need to have this application from a contractual perspective? And do we need to have this application from an audit perspective? Or if we do have an audit, does this application provide us with the right set of audit trails? On the operation side, we talk about the disaster recovery, the business continuity. We talk about the ways that we can integrate and the different tooling that's involved, the deployment, and along with the security and compliance, we want to talk about kind of, the jurisdiction, the regulations, the ITAR compliance, privacy, encryption, so on and so forth. This one kind of gets granular, but at this point, we're talking about a top-down approach. On the other side of the fence is that we also have the ability to perform an application analysis through a second framework, which is really simply, it's really called the 5 R's of modernization, where what we're taking a look at over here is really the first R is retire. And this is if you have a legacy application, it's providing some value, but it's really, it's really expensive, and there might be a replacement that really has a lower, what we call a total cost of ownership. You may want to take a look into that and completely replacing it as opposed to just spending time and building something out. You also have the ability to replace, right? And when we replace, we're essentially doing that, right? We're replacing a system altogether, whereas the first one was a retire, and the retire talks about just completely discontinuing the application altogether. Expand is something that I'm going to really be talking about for the rest of the presentations, but when we're talking about expanding, what we're really talking about is, this application provides us good value. There's not really a high cost of ownership. However, we can actually put a wrapper around it and we can expand it to provide new innovation. We're going to talk about that one, but just to cover the bases, we can also rehost the solution. This is what you've seen often when there's a legacy application. It provides value, but it's very expensive to run. This is where we've seen over the past, I don't know how many years, the move to the cloud. For example, if you're familiar with Microsoft Azure or you're talking about AWS, you have all these on-premises migrations to the cloud. So you're literally rehosting the solution. And last but not least is the re-envision. And that's when an application, a legacy application, is providing good value, but it just can't easily be moved. Where the best solution would be to actually bring it all down, burn it all down, start from the scratch, maybe put it into a cloud environment and completely rebuild it off. Another way to take a look at the modernization initiatives over here is to take a look at kind of, what's going on with the application. Is it siloed? Is it a legacy application? Are we experiencing constrained capacity? Is this a cloud native application that we're leveraging? Or are we just really just looking at providing additional functionality? And the additional functionality is what I'm going to be focused on for the remainder of the presentation, for the 10 minutes that we have over here, because we can really go into all the other, the 5 R's that I just talked about. However, what's really interesting, especially with the trends that we've been seeing with blockchain technology, is we're talking about expanding our legacy systems, right? And just there was a report that came out in 2018 that addressed the integration market. And in order to address integrations and API requirements, organizations spend approximately $12 billion on integration technologies, and that's increasing to around $18 to $20 billion, which is estimated to land somewhere around 2021, 2022. So when you're expanding and you're building a wrapper around your original systems, you're building a competitive edge, you're enabling this business agility and change, you're providing insights and situational awareness, and you're reducing costs and improving efficiency. You're really doing all of this. You're really enabling all of these benefits over here, the building the competitive advantage and enabling business agility and change, because your users, the business users, are not going to new systems, right? As a software vendor, I'll just tell you this: the one thing that our clients are constantly worried about is if we want to integrate a blockchain network into our solution, because it's really going to be able to help the supply chain for reasons that we can get into in another call. We're not here to talk about the use case benefits, but just the how. They're really afraid that we're going to come in and rip up the entire systems and re-envision the whole thing. Realistically, you want to be where your users are. So by putting a wrapper around it and including the solution as a plugin to your current systems, you're really allowing your organization to be agile and not disrupt current functions. Therefore, the user adoption is supposed to be higher. And when we take a look at the application innovation from an expanded value over here, we take a look at a couple different things. So from an application perspective, on the left-hand side, we want to be able to build new business models and new revenue streams and provide these vehicles for customer intimacy. When we take a look at the right-hand side, what industries do you see yourself really sitting in? So we're going to take a look at the aviation example just to kind of put a frame of reference for the participants to really start to sink their teeth into. And I'm just going to put this as a side note over here. If anyone's followed the baseline protocol, this is one of the groups that Envision is involved with. It's an aviation use case presentation deck. It's not released yet, but we're teasing a couple slides over here for the full presentation on this aviation use case and how blockchain will help out for that. There's going to be a steering committee meeting Monday, August 3rd at 10 a.m. Eastern time, and that's going to be able to be streamed through YouTube. So I think what we'll do is we'll follow up with a link, with a direct link to that. But anyway, from a B2B process automation, 75% of companies are exchanging data with external organizations across 2 to 5 business processes. This is the decentralized operations diagram that I just showed you earlier as one of the first slides. However, 60% are still using bespoke systems or manual forms or faxing to manage information between organizations. And in aviation, what's happening right now is because of these bespoke systems or these siloed systems, is that within life limited parts, that there's a rising cost of used parts. And the lack of alignment in systems of record means that a lot of this data is lost throughout the supply chain. As could be seen, for example, that the cost of repairing or overhauling used life limited parts is based on incomplete data, meaning that there's certain things that aren't being seen. And life limited parts are prevented from being shelved as parts of information is missing and siloed. There's also this lack of business process improvement due to missing data. So, the parts specific documents is lost over time. And within the aviation industry, not all systems of record are created equally. And of course, not all systems of record are communicating with each other. The reason why we are demonstrating this type of use case within Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, this is just one of the many systems of record that could be used, because within the D365 environment, there's sales modules, marketing modules, etc. But when focused on the finance and operations side, or better known as finance and supply chain management, you could see that from the finance side, there's everything from accounts payable all the way down to general ledger, finance reporting, and payroll. But on the supply chain management side, we have asset management and inventory management and everything else that comes with that. So diving in a little bit deeper of how this use case could be addressed within D365 is, for example, there's an asset management module. Out of the box, no custom configuration. You pay for the license, you get this. It allows you to have this asset maintenance controls. It allows you to manage maintenance requests and the bill of materials. Also, the work order management is included. You can have counters and scheduling workflows that we're going to dive into next. You can have lifecycle states and document storage. Diving into the counters are really interesting because you can have 3 different types of counters, for example. You can have counters that are manually inputted. You can have counters that are inputted by production hours or by production quantity. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the screenshot, you can have counters for degrees, for hours, right, for temperature, for hours, for distance, etc., which is important as we're going to get through with this example. We also have different life cycle states. So for example, asset life cycle states are used to define whether an asset is active or inactive. And you can have these different life cycle states like active and repair, new and scrapped. On the other side of the fence, for example, a counterparty can also be using Dynamics 365 to manage their work orders. So you can manage your work order pools, your governance and checklist lines. You can have the ability to manage the asset within work orders and project tracking and asset lifecycle states. Diving into the work order types just for one moment, you can see that work order types are used to categorize work orders. And you can even have categorization such as corrective or preventative work order types. Similarly, like counters, you can also have work order lifecycle states, and that really defines the state of the work order, whether you're completed, finished, in progress. And this is how you start to now notify all the other organizations that are involved in this. So when you take a look at this really from the top level down, assets are really created in a hierarchical structure, and they can be related to functional locations, and the maintenance jobs can also be planned at all levels in the asset structure. So for example, just kind of taking a look at this screen right here, that we have this asset, which for example is the engine, And then a part of that could be a fan blade that there's a maintenance plan associated to that particular asset. And then it could run through a counter. The counter goes through the job type. Then the job type is triggering a workflow, which is then sending a message over to potentially, let's just say, a third party, which is providing the manufacturing, right? And or providing the repair of this particular asset, for example, if it was like a fan blade or something like that, right? So then there's the work order and the work order type and everything that we just discussed. Thinking back over here now on this application is that you have this blockchain network, which allows you to be able to have this integration between all these different organizations, leveraging this blockchain network, right? So this is how you can now use the expand modernization to be able to provide new value, such as a better experience to your customer, because now you have this system like Dynamics 365, for example, that can manage all these data points, and then all these data points could be communicated in a way that is regulatory compliant, CISO compliant, and this is facilitated through, for example, we have an Envision Blockchain Connector. This connector allows you to integrate globally with any system that you can imagine while still keeping your privacy and still keeping compliance by leveraging new techniques that we've talked about in previous webinars. So if you were to put all of this together, you first start at your business use case, whatever industry that you're in, whatever use case that you're at, perform an application assessment and prioritization. We recommend to take a look at the 5 R's, and that should be able to help you get some sort of understanding as to where the value is. So I know that we're coming just right up to the 30-minute mark. I think I was able to squeeze in all of these points over here. But again, some of the next steps that we mentioned around the baseline protocol steering committee call on August 3rd to dive into this aviation use case a little bit deeper. You'll see exactly how blockchain can help out with that one. We recommend you to leverage our services and workshops that I'll share on the next screen over here. And obviously, if you're interested in that integration capability for expansion, contact us really to learn about this Envision connector, if you will. And just for the recording, I want to be able to showcase the different services that Envision Blockchain provides. So just starting at the left, we have the consulting and custom development services. We leverage modern and on-cloud solutions. And also we provide these type of use case assessments, application innovation assessments, and prioritizations to really help you understand where the value is. So again, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate the time. Have a good day. Bye-bye.